Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Couch Cruisers. This time around we're going to be looking at communication methods that you can use while at sea. We're going to take a look at satellite, we're going to take a look at VHF, ham, as well as single sideband. So here I have listed the typical types of communication used on boats while at sea. VHF is probably the most common type of communication used while at sea. VHF is line of sight only. For a sailboat to sailboat communication with both of their antennas being 60 feet up in the air at the top of the mast, that line of sight maxes out at about 20 miles. Line of sight is very useful when you're within distance or transmittance distance from the coast because you can quickly hail the emergency services. It's also useful because you can get weather information, and it is the primary method of boat-to-boat or boat-to-shore communication. I would really not be interested in taking a trip without a VHF radio on the boat. They're just going to be required. When you come into port, you're going to need to be able to call the port authorities to do your checking in, to figure out where you can anchor, to figure out where you can get a slip if you're going to do that. If you're going to call a drawbridge to tell them to raise the drawbridge so that you can go through, or if you need to go through a lock, all of these are going to require your VHF radio, and that's kind of a must-have. Now, the price range there for them, the $50 one will get you a cheapo handheld with a range of somewhere between 1 and 3 miles. The most expensive option there is pretty cool because it comes with built-in GPS, and that's a fixed mount radio for your boat, so it can do some extra stuff that I will go into in the next slide. Communication while aboard ship at sea isn't just about sending but also receiving, and that's why I stuck shortwave radio onto the chart here. I thought a shortwave radio receiver would be a good thing to have on a boat because it's cheap, it gets you weather information, and you can listen to other people's single sideband or ham radio transmissions just to get an idea, or to listen to some of those cruiser nets without the expense or the licensing requirements of ham. Single sideband is a great feature to have on your boat. It's got extremely long communication ranges. Some of the stuff I read said up to 7,000 miles. Good thing about it is wherever you are, you'll be able to reach emergency services and get your weather information. One of the downsides to it is the expense of it, where the radio will run you $2,500 and then a modem to go with it. Now, the modem is a great feature though, because once you add the modem to your single sideband, you can then do email. But don't think of this as like your Gmail or your Hotmail account. This is text-based only and ridiculously slow. So figure 5 minutes per email. You know, this is more like Twitter messages than full email that you're used to. The other thing that I thought was cool about single sideband is you can use it for position reports. So if you want it to check in for you and update a web page to say this is where I am every 20 minutes, you can set it up to do that. And single sideband, we also check the entertainment box there because you have cruiser nets and you can talk to people around the world using that. Ham does all the same things as single sideband, with the one addition of you can make telephone calls with it, where you call a shoreside operator and then ask them to patch you through to whoever you want to call. The restriction with the ham telephone calls is they have to be non-commercial only. One other big difference between SSB and ham is that with email on the ham radio, once you buy the hardware, you can do email for free. With the single sideband, you actually need to connect to a email service provider, and that will run you $250 and up per year. I also included EPIRBs on this site, and EPIRB is also including personal locator beacons, and those are simply for signaling when you have a distress. And I'll go into the different types of EPIRBs and personal locator beacons a little bit later. And then finally we have satellite. Satellite does pretty much everything that you would want, but as you start adding on options, it gets very expensive very quickly. So your VHF radio. This is your must-have on the boat, and you probably want more than one. Maybe a VHF for the boat itself that's mounted to the boat with the antenna on top of the mast for your maximum transmit radius. And then maybe a handheld one to take with you in the dinghy so that if somebody's on the boat and somebody's in the dinghy, you can still communicate with each other. As I said previously, line of sight. Figure 3 miles for your handheld one max, and figure 20 miles maximum for your sailboat to sailboat with the tall antenna on top of your mast. Now within the US, there is no requirement for licensing, and anybody can use a VHF as long as you're on a boat. Outside of the United States, you need a ship station license and you need a restricted radio operator's permit. The ship station license says, I have a radio on my boat that can be used to transmit. And the restricted operator says, I'm authorized to use that equipment. Now, getting these licenses for use outside the United States does not require any kind of a test. All you do is fill out paperwork with the FCC, and I have the link a little bit later. Research says that's about $160 and $85 respectively. So some VHF radios can be programmed with a Marine Mobile Service Identifier number, your MMSI. And what that does is just like a unique phone number for your radio. And if you have someone's MMSI number or you give them yours, the person can add that to their contact list in their radio. And by selecting you from the contact list, they can force your radio to change to the channel that they are on so that you can make a call to them. Now all this does is make the station change to the one that the caller is on. It doesn't make a private call. All it does is put you on the same channel so that you're ready to talk and let your buddy know that you want to talk. Now the MMSI is also important for the next option, digital selective calling. And that's what I just described. The MMSI is just the identification number for the radio, and those are free. Digital calling is how that you actually make those calls. And the contact-to-contact one I talked about. But DSC also works for emergencies, and you'll see a lot of radios that just have an emergency button that you can hold down for 5 seconds, and that kicks off the emergency distress. If your radio has built-in GPS, or if you've plugged it into the GPS, that distress call will go out with your MMSI, so that the Coast Guard knows whose boat it was, and that the Coast Guard has the GPS signal to come and get you. Remember though that this is line of sight, so you're within 20 miles of the shore or so for this thing to work. And when you do that emergency distress using the DSC call, any of the boats close to you will get a very annoying, sounds like a smoke alarm, signal on their radio, and it will automatically change their radio to channel 16, the distress channel. And then they'll be able to listen for any information or for your Mayday call. Also, if you've programmed a MMSI number of a contact, you can actually transmit the contact's GPS to you or yours to them. So on from VHF to single sideband. Single sideband is your long-range communication up to 7,000 miles. And just like the VHF, to use it outside of the United States, you're going to need the ship station license and you're going to need the restricted radio operator's permit. And these are just fill out paperwork with the FCC, and there's the link to go and get those forms. Once you have them, the ship station says you can transmit, and the restricted operator says you're allowed to operate that device. As we said previously, the SSB does boat to boat, boat to shore. It can do email if you buy the add-on modem. It can do weather, and then you have CruiserNet so that you can talk to other people in the local area, find out where good anchors or good harbors are. And as we said previously, your email service will cost you $250 plus a year because they're storing your emails, processing them to get rid of any pictures and get rid of any junk email, so that with the very limited bandwidth you have, you can only download the text and the part that is actually important to you. So ham radio. Ham radio does everything that single sideband is, or does. The big difference is it requires a certification in order to utilize it. So you will still need the ship's station license, and then in addition to that, you'll need the certification. And the certification tests don't actually look that bad. Everything I read made them sound scary, but when I actually took a look at the test, if you go to that URL there, aarl.org, Not only do they tell you what information is going to be on the test, they actually give you the pool of questions that the test is from, and there's like 250, 300 questions on the test. So yeah, if you have all the questions for the test, it shouldn't be a big deal to actually study for and pass that test. The technical one lets you transmit on just a couple frequencies, but the technical one is required to get the general, and the general is required to get the amateur extra. And those are the different levels moving up as we go down the slide, or moving up in certification level as we go down the slide. The general is the one that you'll need because it lets you transmit on all of the frequencies. And you want your worldwide communication, that's where you're going to have to go. So in addition to giving you the questions to study from that are the exact questions used on the test, the certification website also lets you take a practice test that has the exact questions that are going to be on your test. Well, questions from the pool, right? You don't know which ones you're going to get from the pool, but they're the exact questions from the pool. So, so I could talk about this intelligently, I went and took the practice test, having done zero studying and knowing nothing about radio communication, and I was able to pull a 63 on that technician test. So if I can get a 63, never having looked at the study material, I think that these certifications are well within the realm of possibility for anyone who wants to put forth the effort. One thing I also found interesting that was different than a lot of the cruising books I've read is there is no longer a Morse code requirement for a ham certification. The FCC removed the Morse code requirement in 2007. The other benefit to ham, in addition to being able to make phone calls over it, is that email service is free once you buy the hardware, unlike SSB where you'll need to pay for the email service. So EPIRBs and personal locator beacons. These are very good safety equipment to have on any boat. They both work the same way by sending a signal to a satellite with your GPS information should you activate them. The three types here, the personal locator is the smallest, and that's for a person. They're also the cheapest, and they have the lowest or the shortest battery life. So if you fall in the ocean, you have 24 hours minimum before the battery goes dead on that device. And hopefully somebody comes and fishes you out within that 24 hours. The PLBs are registered to an individual, whereas the EPIRBs are registered to a vessel. The EPIRBs have to last at least 48 hours by definition, and there are two types of EPIRB. Category 1 auto deploys, so when they're 6 feet underwater, the EPIRB will automatically trigger and float to the surface and start calling for help for you. The Category 2 does not automatically release, and you have to flick a switch to tell it you want to call for help. Price is pretty comparable, but the hydrostatic release that tells the EPIRB to let go of the boat needs to be serviced. And that does raise the maintenance cost of the Category 1 EPIRBs. Satellite communication. There's really only two satellite companies that offer global coverage for your cruiser needs. Iridium is worldwide, covers absolutely everywhere, whereas Inmarsat doesn't cover the poles. So anywhere that there's not icebergs, you would have connectivity. I don't think them not covering the poles is a big idea because I don't intend to go anywhere that it's cold. There are four basic types. You have your messenger communicator that just does text messages, lets you send out a ping telling people where you're at or do a distress call. And these are the cheapest of them all. You have your hotspot that will use your satellite link, and then locally it will make a Wi-Fi hotspot for you and let you use some very specific apps to do messaging or phone calls over that hotspot. You have your normal sat phone, and you have the I should have stayed at work package that will actually give you true internet while underway. So let's look at each of these in detail. So for the communicator type devices, I looked at two of them, the Spot Gen 3 and the Garmin InReach. Drastically different price points, but also a drastically different feature set. Both of them would let you send out an SOS. Both of them would let you send preset messages saying, hey, I'm okay, or haven't died yet. And both of them would let you send out pings to update an online web page so that friends and family could log into that site to see where you were at. And that's where the difference is stopped. All of the additional features only came in the Garmin Reach. That one, the Garmin Reach, lets you send custom text messages, and it lets you do GPS navigation. This might be a good device to have as a backup GPS in addition to its extra satellite features. So the next step up in satellite communication is something like the Iridium Go. The Iridium Go would create a local Wi-Fi hotspot, and then you could connect your laptop, tablet, phone to that hotspot, and then the Iridium Go would establish a satellite link for you and use that satellite link to transmit. Now, just because you have a local Wi-Fi hotspot, though, don't think you'll be surfing the internet over it. These typical satellite connections are around 9 kilobits per second. So to put that in perspective, the modems that we used for dial-up 20 years ago when AOL was a thing were 56 kilobits. So this is 1/6 as fast as that old school modem that you used to dial into AOL. So you can forget about Facebook, you can forget about Instagram, you could make some phone calls, you could do some text messages, you could get weather information, but general web surfing is not going to happen on this. Yes, you can do some posting, so you'll use their custom app and you'll type in the text you want and hit post, and that text will show up on Facebook or Twitter, but you're not going to be able to browse any of those streams. The device itself, this Iridium Go that makes the hotspot for you, is around 800, and then plans depend on how much data you want to use and how many phone calls you want to make. And they all do require an activation fee to get them going. So satellite phones. Obviously, it's a phone. You call anybody you want to, anytime you want to. It's a phone. One of the great things that I liked about the satellite phone, though, is receiving calls is free to the person receiving them. So if you take a satellite phone on your trip, everybody who's back at home still has a day job making money, can call you, and that person can spend the $1 a minute if they think it's important enough to talk to you. And then you have the phone for emergencies only, and you can call whoever you need to in an emergency to get the assistance that you need. Now, these sat phones will also let you do email and let you get the weather files to download so that you can see which way the wind's going to be blowing in the next couple days. Sat phones do require 2 types of minutes or balances in order to be used. You have to have your call time, and you have to rent a line. So that line will cost you about $50 a month. And then after the line fee, you'll need to pay per minute in order to use it. So with this cheapest example here, you'd be spending $1.30 a minute basically. Not bad though for worldwide connectivity and free incoming calls. So the Iridium Pilot, this is what I was calling the I should have stayed at work package. First thing to notice here is the speed of these. They do go up to 128 kilobits per second, so essentially ISDN speeds. But for their lowest speed option, which is the one I priced out here to show you what these things would cost, for the lowest speed here, you're still looking at $10 per megabyte. This video is around 200 megabytes, so this video would have cost you around $2,000 to download over your Iridium Pilot data plan. Also, this slowest speed here, 32, figure that's half the speed of that AOL modem we talked about earlier. I think for the vast majority of our cruising community, these are probably not something that you need to add to your yacht. Very cool device though. So for my personal plan, when I actually take off, list of things that I want to put on the yacht. A handheld VHF for whenever someone goes out in the dinghy, they can call back to the boat, or when they're ashore and they go to the grocery store, they can call back to the boat and ask, do you want Cool Ranch or spicy Doritos? The boat itself needs a VHF so that I can ask for toll bridges to be raised or ask where the best place to anchor is. There'll be 3 people on board, and I want a PLB attached to every life jacket. I want an EPIRB for the boat itself so that if we end up going down or having to ditch, we can throw that in the life raft with us. And then of the long-range communication methods, I liked the sat phone option best. What appealed to me about the sat phone was the lower initial cost versus sideband or ham, the no requirements for any types of licensing, just buy the phone, activate it, and you're good to go, and the free incoming calls. It was really the free incoming calls that did it for me, because anybody with your phone number can call you just like they call your house phone now, talk as long as they want to pay for, and you've got your socializing out of the way. And then if you need to call in an emergency situation, then paying that $1.30 a minute when you need to talk to a doctor now, $1.30 a minute is a great deal if you need some help. So I liked the sat phone best of all for my personal communication. And I'm not trying to knock any other. There's some great things about the single sideband. Being able to get the email on it was great. The ham with the largest breadth of channels available to you for talking to other individuals sounded like some entertainment. If you're spending 30 days on a passage, it might be fun to hang out on there and talk to everybody. Just the sat phone was my personal favorite, trying to keep things in a budget. Thanks for watching. As always, like, comment, subscribe. I really appreciate your guys' feedback. And I'd especially like to thank everybody who subscribed to the channel. With 150 subscribers, we are now beating out Sheldon Cooper's Fun with Flags. So that's somewhat of an achievement for us. Thanks again. I will see you guys after the new year.